Well, in this episode, I got to go back to the reconnaissance work in respect of the coastal erosion studies funded by the state government of Kerala. Unlike other geological research projects which address the phenomena that are frozen in the rocks, what I was focusing in the present project was actually a process-oriented study. In other words, monitoring of the beaches, beach changes over a segment of 20 or 21 kilometers between Thottappally in the south and Alappuzha in the north along the beach face. So it needed definitely a big crew, not just me and J. Raju. This unfortunately, Mr. Raju, while serving as professor of geology in one of the SN colleges, died of had an untimely death. I have a greater regard for this man because he was a person, a beginner, but who was ready to learn anything new that is offered to him. In other words, even if you have to make a person to understand whatever you want to tell him and about new things, and the person should have a receptive mind. That is one. Number two, he will have to continue to think and work and read over it until he grasps the basics. So that is an exceptional requirement for any researcher would need, and Raju is no less a person in doing that. Then, of course, I am there in the project, Raju is there, but two people cannot do any wonder in a process geological research. So I needed to put together a larger team. Of course, Rama Sharma was very much excited about the program. When I spoke to him, he said he will be available for the days when we are in the field. Mohan Kumar just simply followed what Rama Sharma was prepared to do. Then I had also invited the final year students or the first year students doing the MSc Geology course in Karyavattam to be part of the program, or anybody for that matter who can support the activities in the field. And we need a crew of at least 2 + 1 3 + 1 4 + 1 5. 5 people crew is very essential in order to save the time that we devote in the field. In other words, we have identified one profile each for every kilometer of beach distance. Now, speaking of the beach distance, perhaps those days Kerala beaches were the only example of a beach where from Marthandanthura in the south to Thalappadi in the north, the entire beach area was actually marked once every 100 meters by a stone, by a monument painted with Coast Guard yellow and written in with the ownership who has planted this stone, and then what is the chainage. Well, this stone was marked as KERI and then so many meters. So, and kilometers. So the locating a point of observation for repeated observations over a period of 1 year or 1.5 years was no problem at all. KERI is actually the Kerala Engineering Research Institute operating from Pichi. In fact, immediately after independence, during the first 5-year plan period, the coastal erosion or beach erosion and consequent damages and disruption of life and property of the people settled in the backshore, that attracted the attention of the Planning Commission. And there was, I think, funding to build hard defensive structures along the coast. Not the entire coast. For example, as of 1978 or so, 290 kilometers of the 565 kilometer long shoreline had been protected by hard structures like seawalls. And if you talk about seawalls, there is a history about it. Well, the history is, for example, we have a growing field in a place called Chilakur, a village called Chilakur, toward the southern end of Varkala or Pavanasan Cliff. And this is a huge investment done in the early part of or latter part of 1930s in order to protect the coastal waterway or the intra-coastal waterway from what is called Kovalam to Alappuzha and further north. And this is a growing field. It's a huge one. Even today it is intact because in that segment in the Chilakur village, the canal is hardly 100 meters away from the shoreline. So those people who designed the right of way for the canal or the intra-coastal waterway also had paid sufficient attention to build a protective structure, hard protective structure, such as groins. And perhaps in the whole state of Kerala, this is the only protective structure built in the latter half of 1930s, still intact. Okay, now back to the story. So, when the government of India, while providing funds for the hard protective structures to be erected along the beach, had also sought help from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. United States Army Corps of Engineers is a very interesting group. I still remember somewhere some lines I read in a printed material that if the United States Senate appropriates enough money to the U.S. Army Corps will build a ladder to walk up to the moon. This is a quote unquote. Another interesting thing is the famous writer Mr. Mark Twain had noted in some place in his some writings that if Army Corps of Engineers are allowed to continue their work in the lower reaches of Mississippi River, because those days the Mississippi River, the length of the river was reduced by 46 miles. And at sufficient time, given time, in another certain number of years, the Mississippi River will disappear. The channel will be all reduced because of the activities of the what is called Army Corps of Engineers. They have excellent engineering solutions. I think there was one Mr. M. Das or so, an Indian origin engineer, perhaps those days employed by the U.S. Army Corps. That much for the U.S. Army Corps. And two engineers from U.S. Army Corps, Mr. Watts and someone else, they were invited, they were allotted or deputed by the U.S. Army Corps on the request of the Indian government, central government. And they came and very happily worked with the Kerala Coast program, preventive erosion programs. And it is what they did was not only that they built a sea wall in the Punnapara coast, and also tried the what is called beach nourishment. In other words, providing new sand material to the sand that was removed by erosion, permanently removed by erosion. That is the interesting part. So, in America, what they used those days were beach nourishment, or in the northern Europe, when they tried beach nourishment, they had huge slurry pumps pumping the sand either from the offshore. That is it. You have a dredger that sits in the offshore, and from the seabed, sand is pumped over to the foreshore of the beach. And of course, India did not have any kind of such machinery or technology. So, what we could use is, hands and legs, that's all. So, even today, in the library of the Kerala Engineering Research Institute, PC, there should be albums showing the activities of beach nourishment, of photos showing the activities of beach nourishment. In other words, a crew of men will be digging the sand from the deep back shore and fill the sand in the baskets. Then women will carry the basket of sand on their head and walk toward the foreshore. And there will be another group of men. It is actually like a chain. So many people are involved, and those people who are on the seaside of the seawall, they will collect the basket and dump the sand in the foreshore, in the sense that in the what is called the swash, beyond the swash limits. So that also did not become very successful. But the sea walls, of course, they protected the back shore for a while. A famous coastal process geologist, Stephen Leatherman, attached to the University of Maryland, and made a statement, and I quote, "The sea walls are good as long as they stand." In other words, quote unquote, in other words, the sea walls will do their work, but unfortunately they will collapse because the toe of the sea wall is under severe erosion wherever they are placed. When the toe is under severe erosion, naturally the sea wall will sink. The stones in the sea wall and in the foundation will sink. As soon as it starts sinking, the sea wall gets deformed, and finally the stones will get what is called displaced and get buried in the sand. Finally, there will not be any. There will be only a fossil seawall or trace fossil of seawall, and not a real seawall. So seawall is no solution for protecting the beaches even those days, even in the 20th century actually, early part of the 20th century. So, back to the main story, I had put together a crew of Raju, me, Ram Sharma, Mohan Kumar, and another young man who was finishing up his B.Tech in Mechanical Engineering in Trivandrum Engineering College, Mr. Shyam Kumar, alias Kuttan, who is a cousin of my wife. So, because our field trips begin only on the end of the week, in the afternoon of Friday, and we are back to our homes in the later in the evening on the Sunday, it was not a big disruption for most people. So then, we ran the reconnaissance trip, and luckily, and that is another important thing, I had a department van on my disposal for this work, because No, tell you the truth, most people are averse to getting out in the outdoor and enjoying suffering the sun, even for it is part of their job. So, and the teachers are no exception to it. And so, for some reason, I had a totally different mindset. Yeah, there will be people like me, absolutely no doubt. So, this regular field trip to this sort of Thottampally, Alappuzha sector, I had carried out for at least 20 times. At least 20 times. In addition to that, I ran a field trip right from Kanyakumari to Thalappadi, off Thalappadi. And we stopped once every 10 kilometers along the beach and did the profiling in before the monsoon in the month of April and after the monsoon in the month of September. And I had nicknamed this program as camps, Cape Comorin Mangalore study, camps. And that was an exceedingly successful study because that is perhaps the only study until then that looked at the entire coast, not only of Kerala, but also the Kanyakumari district in the west coast, southern west coast. We made a beautiful assessment of the sand that was lost cumulatively from the beaches, that sand that was gained cumulatively from the beaches of Kerala. Okay, back to the main story. The main story, what we did, we gathered all the people, everyone is very well disciplined. What is the advantage? Nobody need to pay any money on this trip from their pockets, because I will defray the cost of food and lodging from the fund provided by the research project, provided in the research project. So that is actually, for most people, well, I would say it is an attraction, simply. If you are a student, you want to join this trip, yeah, you are welcome. Only thing is, I want you to do whatever task that is assigned to you successfully, that's all. So this is the scheme of the work. On Friday of the second Friday of every month, we will leave Trivandrum by about 3 o'clock, and with all the people I mentioned, and then drive down to Haripada. And on the east side of Haripada Junction, northeast, there is a travelers' bungalow maintained by the state government. We will check in there. There was a caretaker, Mr. Kishan Nair, and I had struck a deal with him. What is the deal? A friendly deal, that's all, nothing else. So that when I write a postcard to Kishan Nair confirming our trip, he will keep that particular room vacant for us. In other words, there is a formal request for accommodation. And there are only 2 rooms there, but of course, that is sufficient for us. So in the morning, we start off by about 6:30 or 7, or right in between, after our morning rituals and a cup of tea. We check out, actually, drive off to what is called to our field. And there is a restaurant on the west side of the highway between Thottampally and Haripada, which is known as Kalpakavadi Inn. We will have our breakfast there, and then we drive all the way down to Thannirmukkam Bund, cross the Bund, and there will be our field assistant, Radhakrishnan. And then during the daytime, we will finish working with this 6, 9, or 10 or 12 profiles, then drive straight up to Alappuzha and check into what is called Brothers Restaurant. And we will sleep there overnight, eat there overnight, and then in the morning we will come back to where we left and finish on that much of profiles. And then maybe by 2 o'clock we will be back in Brothers. We will have our lunch there and have to rest for about 1 hour or so. we are back in our Department of Geology van, and hit the road. And on our way back, we will stop Radhakrishnan Tannirmukkam, and we will stop for dosa, chammandi, and tea. Several tattu dosa. Those days the tattu dosa name was not there, but in a shop, tea shop, that is opposite of the Kayakulam bus station, and from there it is one straight to drive. All that by about 8 o'clock or 9, between 9, no, thereabout, we will be back home in Thiruvananthapuram safely and securely. So that is the outline of our work, and I will go back to another episode in the next episode, the details of the work.